Darth Talon was not just a powerful Sith, but also an extremely attractive seductress who used her beauty to manipulate everyone. Yet most fans don't understand her full story, and that's why we've spent weeks researching her complete timeline. We'll reveal how this red Twi'lek slave became the assassin of Darth Krayt, seduced Cade Skywalker, and then vanished into the shadows. But to fully understand how she became so powerful, we need to go back to the very start of her dark journey. The young Twi'lek girl who would become Darth Talon was raised from childhood in the One Sith Order on Korriban. As a Lathan, the rarest type of red-skinned Twi'lek, she stood out among the thousands of acolytes training in the Valley of the Dark Lords. Little is known about her life before the Sith, only that she was identified as Force-sensitive at a young age and brought to Korriban to serve Darth Krayt's vision. This wasn't the old Sith Empire, and it didn't follow Darth Bane's rule of two that had limited the Sith to just one master and one apprentice. Instead, this was the One Sith, created by Darth Krayt, who believed thousands of Sith should serve under a single Dark Lord. Krayt himself was ancient, having survived since the Clone Wars when he was a Jedi Knight named Ashard Het, who had fought alongside Anakin Skywalker. However, after Order 66, he wandered the galaxy until the Yuuzhan Vong captured him and implanted coral seeds that caused constant pain while making him live far longer than normal. This endless agony taught him that strength came through suffering, so he rejected both Jedi weakness and Bane's limitations. While the galaxy thought the Sith were extinct, Krayt spent over a century building his forces on Korriban in the Valley of the Dark Lords. By the time the girl began her training, thousands of students were learning there, and all of them served Krayt's vision, where Sith worked together instead of fighting each other for power. The girl's training fell under Darth Ruyn, a Twi'lek Sith Lord whose methods were brutal even by Sith standards. Under his harsh guidance, she survived trials that killed most other apprentices. The specifics of her training remain undocumented, but it forged her into a weapon of terrible efficiency. Under Ruyn's teaching, she mastered advanced lightsaber combat through relentless practice. She specialized in the acrobatic Ataru form and the precise Makashi style, developing a unique one-handed fighting technique that would become her signature. Her combat training went beyond mere swordplay. She learned to channel the dark side through every movement, making each strike potentially lethal. Beyond fighting, the Academy taught her the skills of an assassin. She mastered force lightning and stealth techniques, learned to read her enemies' weaknesses, and developed the cold ruthlessness that would define her career. Most importantly, she learned absolute loyalty to the One Sith cause, subordinating all personal desires to serve Krayt's vision. Her real transformation began when she started earning her Sith tattoos, which weren't just decorations, but were carved into her flesh by Darth Krayt himself. Each tattoo was earned in ritual combat, marking her achievements and devotion to the Sith. The process was agonizing, but she endured it again and again until her body became covered in black markings that told the story of her trials. Meanwhile, the galaxy outside Korriban had no idea about the growing threat because everything looked peaceful on the surface. 130 years after the Battle of Yavin, Luke Skywalker's New Republic had fallen long ago and was replaced by the Galactic Alliance, which struggled with internal problems. The Jedi Order had hundreds of members who served as peacekeepers, while Emperor Roan Fel commanded his own Force users called Imperial Knights, who served the light side but were loyal to the Empire first. Talon's Rise. The girl's final test came after years of training when Krayt commanded her to kill Darth Ruyn. This was her ultimate test of loyalty. She had to prove that her devotion to the Order was stronger than any personal attachment. Therefore, she had to execute her own master on Krayt's demand to show she could sacrifice anything for the Sith cause. She found Ruyn meditating in his chambers, and the old Twi'lek smiled when he sensed her approach, because he knew this moment would come. He didn't resist as she ignited her lightsaber and removed his head with one clean strike. And she felt no sadness or guilt because Ruyn had trained those emotions out of her long ago. When she presented Ruyn's head to Krayt, the Dark Lord was impressed by her cold efficiency, which was better than warriors who killed in anger. As a reward, he gave her a Sith name that matched her deadly nature by calling her Darth Talon, after the curved claws of predators that strike without warning. The name perfectly captured what she had become, since she was beautiful and deadly with no mercy in her heart. But Krayt had even bigger plans for his new weapon, because he elevated her to become one of his hands who were his personal enforcers. Her partner would be Darth Nihil, a pale Nagai warrior whose species was naturally good at fighting, and while Talon preferred stealth and precision, Nihil favored overwhelming force. Together, they would spread fear across the galaxy as Krayt's instruments of destruction. As Talon adjusted to her new power, Krayt revealed the plan he had been making for decades, which would bring the Sith back to rule. The one Sith would manipulate the galaxy into war by sabotaging the Ossus Project, where Jedi and reformed Yuuzhan Vong worked together to heal worlds damaged by the Vong War. Sith agent Darth Maladi would corrupt the project's biotechnology so that instead of healing planets, it would create disasters, and this would give Emperor Fel an excuse to declare war on the Alliance. Then, in all the chaos, the Sith would emerge from hiding to conquer both empires at once. Standing in Krayt's throne room, with Nihil beside her, Darth Talon finally understood why she had been trained so hard. She had been shaped from a slave into the perfect weapon for this exact moment, and soon the galaxy would learn to fear the Crimson Assassin whose beauty hid a killer's heart. The War of Sith Design. The galaxy's descent into chaos began with an act of deliberate sabotage that would spark the Sith Imperial War. For decades, the one Sith had infiltrated both the Galactic Alliance and Fel Empire, positioning agents to manipulate events at the perfect moment. That moment came with the Ossus Project, a joint venture between the Jedi Order and the reformed Yuuzhan Vong to heal worlds devastated by the Vong War using bioengineering. Under Krayt's orders, Sith agent Darth Maladi corrupted the project's biotechnology. However, instead of healing barren worlds, the sabotaged organisms created ecological disasters wherever they were deployed. On Wayland, forests mutated into carnivorous jungles that devoured entire settlements. Meanwhile, on other worlds, plagues spread that killed millions while leaving survivors grotesquely transformed. Thus, the galaxy watched in horror as the Jedi's humanitarian effort became a catastrophe. Public opinion turned violently against both the Jedi and their Yuuzhan Vong allies. Many believed the Vong had deliberately corrupted the project as revenge for their defeat decades earlier. Still, others blamed Jedi incompetence or even deliberate malfeasance. Therefore, the Galactic Alliance, already struggling with internal divisions, found itself politically paralyzed as member worlds demanded action against those responsible. Emperor Roan Fel seized this opportunity, though he didn't realize he was playing into Sith hands. Invoking ancient treaties and claiming the Alliance had lost the moral authority to govern, he declared war in 127 ABY. The Fel Empire's propaganda portrayed the conflict as a righteous crusade against a corrupt government that harbored war criminals. Yet Fel himself was reluctant to start the war and initially forbade his Imperial Knights from participating, but mounting pressure from advisors secretly loyal to Krayt forced his hand. For 3 years, the galaxy tore itself apart. The Sith Imperial War saw massive fleet battles that turned entire systems into graveyards. The Jedi, bound by oath to defend the Alliance despite public hatred, found themselves fighting a two-front war against Imperial forces and their own people's mistrust. Meanwhile, Krayt's hidden Sith fed intelligence to both sides, ensuring maximum casualties and preventing any decisive victory that might end the conflict too soon. By 130 ABY, the Galactic Alliance could no longer sustain the war effort. Their fleet was decimated, their economy in ruins, and their member worlds defecting en masse. Thus, the Alliance formally surrendered to the Fel Empire, seemingly ending the bloodshed. Emperor Fel prepared to rebuild the galaxy under Imperial rule, unaware that his victory was precisely what Krayt had orchestrated. The betrayal came 3 days after the Alliance's surrender. Thousands of hidden Sith warriors emerged simultaneously throughout the Empire. They had been posing as Imperial officers, bureaucrats, even members of Fel's own guard. Therefore, the coordinated strikes paralyzed Imperial command structure within hours. Emperor Fel barely escaped Coruscant with a handful of loyal Imperial Knights, forced to abandon the throne world to Sith control. But the true massacre occurred on Ossus, where the Jedi Order maintained their primary academy. Krayt had identified the Jedi as the only force capable of rallying resistance against Sith rule. Therefore, they had to be eliminated completely and publicly to break the galaxy's spirit. The attack began at dawn, with orbital bombardment that shattered the Academy's defenses. Then came the ground assault, with hundreds of Sith lords and warriors storming the temple grounds. The slaughter was methodical and merciless. Jedi Masters who had survived the war found themselves overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Meanwhile, Padawans barely old enough to hold lightsabers were cut down in training halls. Furthermore, the temple's ancient archives burned as Sith destroyed millennia of accumulated knowledge. By the time the sun was set, the Jedi Order that had protected the galaxy for over 1,000 generations was effectively extinct. Among the handful who escaped was Cade Skywalker, son of Jedi Master Cole Skywalker. The boy watched his father die holding off multiple Sith to buy time for others to flee. Something broke in young Cade that day, a fracture in his connection to the Force that would define his future. Thus, he disappeared into the Outer Rim, abandoning his heritage and drowning his abilities in death sticks and denial. 3 days after Ossus, Darth Krayt revealed himself to the galaxy. Broadcasting from the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, he declared the formation of a new Sith Empire that would bring order through strength. The one Sith emerged from the shadows to claim their rule openly, with thousands of Sith taking positions of authority across former Alliance and Imperial territories, and horrified by the Jedi massacre, accepted Sith rule in exchange for stability. As one of Krayt's hands, Darth Talon now wielded authority second only to the Dark Lord himself. Military commanders who might have dismissed Sith cultists now bowed to her commands or faced immediate execution. Meanwhile, planetary governors competed for her favor, knowing that disappointing the Emperor's hand meant death or worse. Her reputation spread across the Empire like a plague. The Crimson Assassin, whose black tattoos marked her achievements, who appeared from nowhere to eliminate the Empire's enemies with surgical precision. For the next 7 years, Talon hunted the scattered remnants of opposition. Surviving Jedi who had escaped Ossus were tracked to their hiding places and eliminated. Furthermore, Imperial officers whose loyalty to Ruyn Fel ran too deep disappeared in the night. Additionally, resistance cells that formed along former Alliance military units found their leaders assassinated and their bases exposed. Through it all, Talon served as Krayt's perfect weapon, never questioning orders or showing mercy to enemies of the Sith Empire. Mission to Socorro. In 137 ABY, 7 years after the Sith Empire's rise, Darth Talon received her most significant assignment since becoming Krayt's hand. Intelligence networks had finally located Princess Marasiah Fel, daughter of the deposed Emperor, hiding on the desert world of Socorro. Krayt wanted her captured alive to serve as leverage against her father's government in exile, and to demoralize Imperial knights who still resisted Sith rule. Socorro was a smuggler's haven where questions weren't asked and credits spoke louder than ideology. The princess had taken refuge in an Imperial mission, a diplomatic compound that served as a safe house for Fel loyalists. However, she was protected by Imperial Knight Elka Vetter, a skilled warrior trained specifically to combat Force users. Vetter had kept the princess hidden for months, but Sith spies had finally penetrated their security. Talon approached the mission as night fell, using Force concealment to mask her presence from the compound's sensors. Yet rather than attempt stealth, she chose psychological warfare. Setting fire to the mission's outer buildings with Force lightning, she created chaos that drew defenders out of fortified positions. Meanwhile, smoke and flames provided cover while panicked civilians fled in all directions, making organized resistance impossible. Elka Vetter emerged from the main building with her silver lightsaber ignited, immediately recognizing the Sith threat. The Imperial Knight was skilled, having trained since childhood to serve the Fel dynasty. Moreover, her armor could resist some lightsaber strikes, and her Force abilities, while focused on defense and enhancement rather than raw power, made her a formidable opponent. Their duel took place in the mission's burning courtyard, surrounded by flames that cast dancing shadows across ancient stone. Vetter fought with defensive precision, attempting to deflect Talon's aggressive attacks. For several minutes, she managed to hold her ground, even forcing Talon back with a series of counterstrikes. but Talon had the advantage of dark side power and ruthless training. Using her mastery of Ataru's acrobatic strikes, combined with Makashi's precision, she created an opening in Vetter's defense. Her lightsaber severed the knight's sword hand at the wrist, sending both hand and weapon tumbling into the flames. Before Vetter could retreat, Talon's blade pierced her leg, dropping her to her knees. With her opponent crippled but alive, Talon demonstrated why Sith were feared more for their cruelty than their combat skills. She used Force lightning not to kill, but to torture, sending controlled bursts of energy through Vetter's nervous system while extracting information from her mind. The Imperial Knight tried to resist, using mental techniques to shield the princess's escape route, but pain eventually broke through her defenses. When Talon had extracted all useful intelligence, she ended Vetter's suffering with a final burst of lightning that killed the knight. There was no mercy or respect, only cold efficiency in eliminating an enemy of the Sith Empire. The princess had indeed escaped, aided by unexpected allies. A smuggling crew operating a modified freighter called the Minok had been hired to extract her. However, what Talon didn't realize at the time was that this crew included Cade Skywalker, the missing heir to the Jedi legacy. He had spent years hiding his Force abilities behind death sticks and false identity, but fate kept drawing him back into the conflict between light and dark. Rather than return to Coruscant, Talon pursued the princess directly. Her investigation quickly revealed that the damaged ship had fled toward Vendaxa, and she would not allow her prey to escape twice. Assembling a strike force with Darth Nihil and Sith warriors, she set course for the jungle world, determined to complete her mission. The Hunt on Vendaxa. The trail led directly to Vendaxa, a jungle world where Princess Fel's damaged ship had crash-landed after fleeing Socorro. The princess survived, but suffered severe injuries, forcing her protectors to seek shelter while attempting repairs. Meanwhile, Cade's crew had stayed to help, unaware that Sith forces were already closing in. Talon coordinated the pursuit carefully, bringing Darth Nihil and a contingent of Sith warriors to ensure no escape this time. Vendaxa's surface was a nightmare of carnivorous plants and hostile fauna, yet Talon used this to her advantage, using beast control techniques to drive native predators toward the crash site to flush out her prey. The creatures created chaos as they attacked everything in their path. Therefore, while her targets fought for survival against the beasts, Talon positioned her forces for the real assault. The ambush began when two Jedi revealed themselves among the princess's protectors. Wolf Zazen, a Zabrak Jedi Master who had survived Ossus despite losing his arm to Darth Nihil, emerged with his green lightsaber ignited. Beside him stood Shadow Vao, a blue-skinned Twi'lek who had been Zazen's Padawan before the massacre. Both had spent 7 years hiding from the Sith, but they couldn't abandon the princess in her time of need. Talon engaged both Jedi simultaneously, demonstrating her mastery of combat. She flowed between defensive sequences to block their coordinated attacks and aggressive strikes aimed at creating openings. Zazen's experience made him dangerous despite his prosthetic arm, while Vao's youth gave him speed and unpredictability. The duel with Shadow Vao took an unexpected turn when he seemed cornered. Just as Talon moved in for what appeared to be a finishing strike, Vao revealed his lightsaber had a second blade. The surprise activation forced Talon to rapidly adjust her attack, and in that moment of recalibration, Vao managed to escape her reach. This tactical revelation would stay with her, a reminder that even seemingly defeated opponents could harbor surprises. Using Ataru's acrobatic techniques, Talon leaped over Vao's low sweep and landed a devastating kick that sent him flying into the jungle undergrowth. With the Padawan temporarily removed, she focused on Zazen. The Jedi Master had adopted a defensive stance, trying to buy time for the others to escape, but Talon had trained specifically to overwhelm Jedi defenses. Combining her aggressive assault with precision strikes, she created a pattern of attacks that slowly forced Zazen to give ground. When he stepped back to avoid a particularly vicious combination, she seized the opening. Force lightning erupted from her free hand, catching Zazen before he could raise his blade to block. The electricity coursed through the Jedi Master's body, overloading his nervous system and dropping him to his knees. Before she could secure Zazen, Princess Fel herself entered the battle. Despite her injuries, the princess attacked with the fury of someone who had lost everything to the Sith. She wielded a stolen lightsaber with more passion than skill, driven by thoughts of Elka Vetter's death. Talon easily deflected the wild strikes, but the distraction allowed Shadow Vao to return to the fight. Then, everything changed in an instant. Cade Skywalker, who had been fighting Sith warriors near the crashed ship, witnessed Talon torturing Wolf Sazan with Force lightning. Something primal awakened in him at the sight. With a gesture born of pure instinct, Cade reached out through the Force and grasped the wreckage of a nearby starship hull. The massive piece of metal, weighing several tons, ripped free from the jungle floor and flew toward Talon with devastating speed. She sensed the attack at the last moment, but couldn't fully dodge while maintaining her lightning assault on Sazan. The wreckage slammed into Talon with crushing force, burying her under twisted metal and debris. The impact broke several ribs and left her momentarily stunned, her concentration shattered. By the time she used the Force to throw off the wreckage, her targets were already fleeing. Sazan, barely conscious, was being carried by Vao and the princess toward their ship. What followed was a running battle through the jungle as both sides received reinforcements. Imperial Knights Antares Draco and Ganner Krieg, who had been protecting the princess from the beginning, fought alongside the Jedi. These weren't ordinary warriors, but elite protectors trained from birth to serve the Fel dynasty. Their silver lightsabers and specialized armor made them nearly equal to Sith in combat. Talon regrouped with Darth Nihil and pursued the fleeing enemies to their ship. In the final moments before the Mynock lifted off, she force-jumped toward the closing boarding ramp, intending to continue the fight aboard the vessel. However, Antares Draco was ready, using a massive force push that sent her tumbling back to the ground. The ship escaped into hyperspace, leaving Talon standing in the jungle with her second major failure. Returning to Coruscant after the Vendaxa failure, Talon expected punishment. She had failed to capture the princess twice now, and Krayt's rage could be terrible. Other Sith had been executed for lesser failures. Yet, when she delivered her report, the Dark Lord focused on an unexpected detail. Her investigation had identified the smuggler who helped the princess escape, Cade Skywalker, son of the legendary Cole Skywalker, last heir to the bloodline that helped shape galactic history for generations. Krayt's obsession with the Skywalker line ran deeper than mere symbolism. From Anakin to Luke to Cole, that bloodline had produced beings of unprecedented Force potential who eventually became pivotal figures in galactic events. Therefore, the corruption of a Skywalker to the dark side would shatter remaining hope among those who still resisted Sith rule. More personally, Krayt believed that Skywalker power might hold the key to healing his own deteriorating condition, as the Yuzhong Vong implants were slowly killing him despite extending his life. New orders came swiftly. Princess Fel was now a secondary concern compared to the opportunity Cade represented. Thus, Talon was to focus all resources on capturing him alive and undamaged. Krayt wanted to turn this lost Jedi into the ultimate Sith weapon, and Talon would be the blade that cut him free from his past. The Trap in the Temple. Intelligence networks across the Sith Empire focused on tracking Cade Skywalker's movements. Every smuggler den was monitored. Every shadow port watched for signs of the Mynock. Yet Cade proved frustratingly elusive, using skills learned during years in the criminal underworld to stay ahead of pursuit. However, what finally provided an opening wasn't his mistake, but his compassion. Reports indicated that the Sith had captured Hosk Traylis, an elderly Bothan Jedi known for his healing abilities. The healer had survived the Ossus massacre and spent years secretly tending to refugees from the war. His capture was significant because he had known Cade's father and might possess information about other surviving Jedi. Therefore, he was brought to the Sith Temple on Coruscant for interrogation. Krayt correctly predicted that Cade's attachment to fellow Jedi would override his survival instincts. Despite abandoning his training and claiming to care nothing for the Force, Cade had repeatedly risked himself to help others. Thus, the trap was elegant in its simplicity. Hold Hosk in the temple's lower levels with minimal apparent security, then wait for a rescue attempt. Talon positioned herself in the detention complex, using Force concealment to remain undetected. She had studied recordings of Cade's fighting style from Vendaxa, noting how he mixed Jedi training with street brawling techniques. This time, she would be ready for his unconventional approach. More importantly, she wouldn't underestimate his raw power again. The infiltration came 3 weeks after Hossk's capture. Cade entered the temple disguised as a bounty hunter, delivering captured Jedi sympathizers. His acting was convincing enough to fool the outer guards, but Talon sensed his Force presence the moment he passed the temple's threshold. Thus, she shadowed him through the corridors, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When Cade reached Hossk's cell and began slicing the lock, Talon revealed herself. She stepped from the shadows with her lightsaber already ignited, blocking his only exit route. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, predator and prey finally face to face without distractions or allies. The duel that followed was unlike any Talon had experienced. Krayt fought with barely controlled fury, his lightsaber work mixing classical sequences with brutal improvisations. He had abandoned the Jedi restraint that made most lightsiders predictable, instead channeling emotions that bordered on the dark side. Talon matched him blow for blow, her single blade creating defensive patterns that turned aside his assault. She tried to maintain distance, using her superior reach and flexibility to strike from unexpected angles. However, Cade pressed forward relentlessly, accepting glancing wounds to land heavier strikes. The turning point came when Cade fully embraced the dark side. His eyes, already bloodshot from death stick withdrawal, flashed with yellow corruption. The force blast he unleashed was powerful enough to shatter every piece of furniture in the corridor and slam Talon against the far wall. Before she could recover, he was on her. One hand locked around her throat, while the other raised his lightsaber for a killing strike. But the moment of triumph became his downfall. Darth Nihil had been monitoring the situation, waiting for the perfect opportunity. As Cade focused entirely on Talon, the Nagai warrior struck from behind. Invisible tentacles of force energy wrapped around Cade's throat, cutting off his air and causing him to drop both Talon and his weapon. Within seconds, the Skywalker heir collapsed into unconsciousness. Talon rose slowly, one hand massaging her bruised throat. She had been defeated again, saved only by Nihil's intervention. Yet instead of shame, she felt anticipation. If Cade could channel such power while fighting against his nature, what might he accomplish if properly trained? Therefore, Krayt's vision of converting him suddenly seemed less like ambition and more like necessity. They brought the unconscious Cade before Darth Krayt in the throne room. The ancient Sith Lord examined his prize with satisfaction, noting the force potential that radiated from the young man even while suppressed. He commended both hands for their success, though Talon noticed the slight emphasis when he praised Nihil's timely assistance. The breaking of a Skywalker. Krayt's campaign to convert Cade Skywalker began immediately. Physical torture proved ineffective. Years of hard living had given him remarkable pain tolerance. Meanwhile, psychological warfare using recordings of his father's death only strengthened his hatred without providing control. Traditional Sith conversion techniques failed because Cade had already touched the dark side through trauma rather than teaching. The breakthrough came when Krayt discovered something unprecedented about his prisoner. During a torture session supervised by Darth Maladi, Cade instinctively used the Force to heal his own wounds. However, this wasn't the calm, light side healing that Jedi practiced, but something raw and primal that drew on dark emotions. When Maladi reported this to Krayt, the Dark Lord immediately recognized its significance. Krayt's most cruel manipulation came when he infected Cade's closest friends, Jariah Sin and Delia Blue, with Yuzhong Vong coral seeds. The Yorick Cool implants caused them excruciating pain and would kill them without intervention. Faced with watching his friends die in agony, Cade's resolve cracked. He was forced to channel his dark side healing ability to save them, each use drawing him deeper into darkness. The healing process revealed why Krayt valued this ability so highly. When Cade channeled healing through anger or desperation rather than compassion, the energy took on dark side characteristics. More importantly for Krayt, it could potentially repair damage that light side healing couldn't touch, including the Yuzhong Vong implants that were slowly killing him. During this period, Krayt assigned Talon to oversee Cade more closely. Sensing an opportunity, Krayt ordered Cade to heal the injuries he had inflicted on Talon during their duel. As Cade channeled the Force to mend her wounds, an unexpected side effect occurred. A force bond formed between them, allowing each to sense the other's presence and emotions. Krayt saw this as useful, believing it would help bind Cade to the Sith. For a brief time, Cade feigned submission to learn more about his captor's plans. Krayt assigned him to train under Talon, creating a twisted master-apprentice dynamic. She demonstrated Sith combat techniques while he pretended to embrace the dark side teachings. During this deception, their interactions grew more complex. There was even a moment of dark intimacy between them, though it was manipulation rather than genuine connection. Talon remained absolutely loyal to Krayt throughout, eventually reporting that Cade's conversion was incomplete, that his submission was false. The final test came when Krayt decided to force Cade's conversion publicly. He arranged for Hosk Traylus, the Jedi healer Cade had tried to rescue, to be brought before the throne. The test was straightforward. Execute the old Jedi to prove commitment to the Sith path. Refusal would mean watching Hosk die anyway, but slowly and painfully. Death and defiance. The throne room had been specially prepared for Cade's final test. Sith lords lined the walls as witnesses, while Krayt sat on his obsidian throne, Yuzhong Vong armor pulsing with each labored breath. Darth Talon stood at Krayt's right hand, her face an emotionless mask of loyalty. Beside her, Darth Nihil waited with characteristic patience, ready to act if the prisoner attempted escape. Hosk Traylus knelt in the center of the room, binders securing his hands behind his back. The elderly Bothan showed no fear despite his situation, meeting Cade's eyes with calm acceptance. They had dragged him from the detention cells specifically for this moment, knowing his connection to Cade's father would make the test more meaningful. Krayt's voice echoed through the chamber as he presented the choice. Cade could take the lightsaber offered to him and execute the Jedi cleanly, proving his commitment to the Sith. Or he could refuse and watch as the old healer died anyway, but much more slowly. There would be no rescue this time, no last-minute escape, only decision and consequence. Cade stood frozen with the weapon in his hand, its weight seeming to increase with each passing second. He struggled with the choice. Part of him wanted to strike down Hosk simply to end his suffering quickly, while another part raged against everything the Sith represented. When Cade continued to hesitate, Krayt grew impatient. The ancient Sith Lord rose from his throne and approached Hosk directly. If his prospective apprentice wouldn't act, he would demonstrate the price of weakness. His lightsaber ignited with a crimson flash as he moved toward the kneeling Jedi. Without warning, Krayt struck. His blade pierced through Hosk's chest in one swift motion, and the old Jedi gasped as the lightsaber burned through his body. Cade watched in horror as Hosk's eyes met his one final time before the life faded from them. Krayt withdrew his blade, letting Hosk's lifeless body fall to the floor. "You see," Krayt said coldly, "your hesitation changed nothing. The Jedi is dead, and his suffering was prolonged by your weakness." What happened next shocked everyone present. As Krayt turned back toward his throne, the air beside Cade shimmered and a translucent figure appeared. Cade Skywalker stood before his son as a force spirit, visible to all through the sheer power of his manifestation. The deceased Jedi Master looked exactly as he had in life, even bearing the wounds from his death at Ossus. Father and son stared at each other across the gap between life and death. Cade didn't speak, but his presence conveyed everything necessary. He reminded Cade of who he truly was, not through words, but through the Force itself. The sight of his father's spirit, still protecting others even in death, shattered whatever hold the dark side had gained on Cade. With sudden clarity and purpose, Cade reached out through the Force toward Krayt's throne. His father's lightsaber, taken as a trophy 7 years ago, flew from its display mount into his waiting hand. The blue blade ignited with a sound that seemed to fill the throne room, its light pushing back the shadows that had dominated this place for so long. Krayt's rage at this defiance was terrible to behold. He unleashed Force lightning at Cade, intending to kill him for this insult. However, Cade had found his center, and his blade intercepted the attack, absorbing the dark side energy. In that moment of perfect clarity, he knew exactly what he had to do. Spinning away from Krayt's assault, Cade struck at the nearest target, Darth Talon. His blade pierced her abdomen in a precise thrust that would incapacitate but not kill. As she gasped and collapsed, clutching the wound, He was already moving toward his next objective. The strike created the distraction he needed, forcing the other Sith to divide their attention between helping their wounded comrade and stopping his escape. Chaos erupted in the throne room as Sith Lords moved to attack the escaping Jedi. Cade fought his way through the temple corridors, using both his lightsaber and the Force to clear a path. The chaos of his rebellion created confusion throughout the Empire, with alarms blaring and Sith forces scrambling to respond. In the confusion, Cade fought toward the temple's upper levels. Sith Lords tried to stop him, but his fury and determination overwhelmed their defenses. Darth Nihil attempted to recapture him, but Cade used a massive force push to send the Nagai warrior crashing through a wall, buying precious seconds to continue his fight. Eventually, Cade's crew, including his mother Morrigan Cord operating under her Nina Calixide identity, helped extract him from Coruscant during the chaos. Through all of this, Talon lay on the throne room floor, pressing her hands to the wound in her stomach. The physical pain was manageable. She had endured worse during her training. She felt only cold fury at being used as a distraction, at being defeated yet again by the Skywalker. There was no sympathy, no understanding, only the bitter taste of failure. Krayt's voice cut through the chaos, ordering the immediate pursuit of the escapees. Still, the damage was done. Cade Skywalker had escaped, though Hosk Traylis had died as Krayt intended. As medical droids arrived to tend to Talon's wound, she heard Krayt's pronouncement of her fate. She had failed in her most important assignment. Once healed, she would face judgment for that failure. The Shadow War. Talon's recovery in the Bacta tank was swift and efficient. The wound Cade had inflicted healed cleanly, leaving only another scar to add to her collection. When she emerged from the medical bay, she expected immediate execution. Krayt's rage over Cade's escape had been terrible, with 3 Sith Lords dead simply for suggesting the failure wasn't entirely Talon's fault. However, the Dark Lord had different plans for his wounded hand. The galaxy had erupted in renewed conflict following Cade's public defiance, and Krayt needed every skilled warrior to maintain control. The escape from Coruscant had galvanized resistance movements across the Empire. Footage of Cade Skywalker wielding his father's lightsaber spread through underground networks, proving that heroes still existed who could stand against the Sith. Meanwhile, Roan Fel's forces grew bolder, launching raids on Sith installations. Furthermore, surviving Jedi emerged from hiding to strike at Imperial targets. What had been a subdued galaxy suddenly blazed with rebellion. Krayt assigned Talon to hunt down these resistance cells with ruthless efficiency. She threw herself into the mission with cold determination, silencing any who opposed the Sith through systematic elimination. Wherever rebellion surfaced, Talon was there to snuff it out, rooting out conspirators and executing any surviving Jedi before they could rally others to their cause. Each success reinforced her absolute loyalty to Krayt and the Sith cause. The bond with Cade that had formed when he healed her remained, stretched thin by distance but not entirely severed. Sometimes she could sense his presence in the Force, a distant echo that she used to track resistance movements. This connection served only as a tool for hunting, nothing more. Everything changed when Darth Weirlock, Krayt's most trusted advisor, betrayed his master. During a mission to Had Abaddon where Krayt sought ancient Sith artifacts to heal his deteriorating condition, Weirlock struck when the Emperor was weakened. The Chegrian Sith Lord used obscure Force techniques to stop Krayt's hearts, then entombed the body in stasis while claiming the Dark Lord had died from his Yuzhong Vong implants. With Krayt dead, the one Sith immediately began fracturing. Weirlock claimed the throne, but many Sith Lords refused to acknowledge him. Some declared themselves independent warlords, carving out personal domains. Others simply vanished, using the chaos to disappear with whatever resources they could steal. Thus, the rule of one, dependent on absolute loyalty to a single leader, collapsed without Krayt's will binding it together. Talon found herself in a precarious position. Her authority derived entirely from being Krayt's hand, a position that meant nothing with Krayt dead. Weirlock offered to maintain her rank if she swore loyalty to him, but she sensed the weakness in his rule. Her loyalty had always been to Krayt alone. Her decision came when Darth Nihil approached her with shocking news. He had discovered evidence that Krayt might not truly be dead, that Weirlock had placed him in stasis rather than destroying the body. Together, they could expose Weirlock's deception and restore their master. This was exactly what a loyal Sith should want, a chance to regain position and purpose. Talon didn't hesitate. Her loyalty to Krayt was absolute, and she would see him restored to power. When Krayt did return, resurrecting himself through pure dark side will and reclaiming leadership of the fractured Sith, Talon stood with Nihil as they welcomed their master back, helped him purge Weirlock's supporters, and prepared for the final war Krayt declared against all who opposed him. She performed her duties perfectly, the ideal Sith warrior once more. The Battle of Taivas. The war reached a turning point when Krayt discovered the location of the hidden temple on Taivas, where Jedi survivors had gathered to preserve their traditions. This represented the largest concentration of Jedi since the Ossus massacre, making it an irresistible target. Therefore, Krayt assembled a massive assault force, determined to finish what he had started 7 years ago. Darth Talon commanded one of the attack wings, leading Sith warriors and Imperial stormtroopers against the temple's defenses. The Jedi had prepared for this day, establishing overlapping fields of fire and force barriers that slowed the initial assault. Still, they were outnumbered 10-1, and many were younglings or elders rather than warriors. As the battle raged, Talon cut through the defenders with cold efficiency. She faced similar opponents from Vendaxa, including Shadow Vao, who had survived their previous encounter. This time, she was prepared for his double-bladed lightsaber trick, having learned from their duel on the Jungle World. Their rematch was fierce, with Vao defending younglings trying to reach evacuation ships. Despite his determination and skill, Talon's experience and dark side power gave her the advantage. After a brutal exchange, Vao was forced to retreat with the younglings, escaping once again, but leaving many other Jedi to face the Sith onslaught. The battle turned catastrophic when Cade Skywalker arrived, having rushed back from his mission upon sensing the attack through the Force. His presence rallied the defenders momentarily, but the cost was devastating. During the chaos, Cade's uncle Nat Skywalker sacrificed himself to save his nephew from a killing blow. Nat's death hit Cade hard. Another Skywalker fallen to protect him, another reminder of the price others paid for his survival. The Sith's overwhelming numbers and elite forces ultimately proved too much. Despite Cade's efforts and the courage of defenders like Wolf Sazin and Master Kukruk, the hidden temple fell. The surviving Jedi were forced to escape, scattering into hyperspace as their sanctuary burned behind them. For Cade, witnessing the temple's destruction and his uncle's death became the catalyst that would drive him to finally embrace his destiny and lead the assault on Coruscant itself. Their duel was purely physical, each strike carrying lethal intent. Cade fought to stop her advance, while Talon fought to eliminate him as an obstacle to victory. The battle ended when the Sith's overwhelming numbers forced all defenders to retreat. The hidden temple was destroyed, its knowledge lost, but most of the Jedi managed to escape into hyperspace. Krayt claimed victory, yet the surviving Jedi would regroup with Imperial and Alliance forces to plan their counterattack. The final battle. The war's climax came when the Allied forces launched a desperate assault on Coruscant itself. Cade Skywalker had united the Jedi with Roan Fel's Imperial Knights and remnants of the Galactic Alliance fleet. Together, they struck at the heart of Krayt's power, while the Sith Empire was distracted by internal conflicts and stretched thin across the galaxy. Darth Talon stood ready in the Sith Temple alongside Darth Strife and other loyalists. She had prepared for this moment, knowing it would likely mean her death. Her loyalty to Krayt was absolute, and she would fight until the end. When the strike team penetrated the temple's defenses, Talon was among the first to engage them. She faced multiple opponents, Jedi Knights seeking vengeance, Imperial Knights fighting for their true Emperor, and soldiers who had lost everything to Sith rule. Her lightsaber wove patterns of death, each movement perfectly executed despite the chaos around her. Then Cade appeared, and everything else faded to background noise. He had grown tremendously since their last encounter, his power now focused and controlled rather than raw and emotional. The difference was immediately apparent when their blades met. Where once he had fought with desperate fury, he now moved with calm purpose that made him far more dangerous. Their final duel was brief and decisive. Cade's mastery had surpassed hers, his unique blend of light and dark techniques creating combinations she couldn't counter. He struck with overwhelming force, shattering her defenses and sending her crashing to the ground. But before he could deliver a finishing blow, she managed to escape in the chaos, fleeing to warn Krayt of Cade's approach. Talon reached the throne room just as Cade arrived to face Krayt. She stood witness to the final battle between them, the ancient Sith Lord unleashing powers accumulated over centuries, while Cade fought with the legacy of every Skywalker before him. The duel raged through the throne room and onto the temple's highest spire, where lightning from a force storm illuminated their clash. In the end, Cade proved victorious. He impaled Krayt through the heart, then used the Force to hurl the body into Coruscant's sun, ensuring no resurrection would be possible. With their master truly dead, the remaining Sith scattered. Some died fighting, others surrendered, and many simply vanished into the chaos of a collapsing empire. Darth Talon had survived the battle and escaped during the confusion. Her fate, like that of many one Sith survivors, became shrouded in mystery. But Talon was far from being one of the most powerful Sith, like the Sith Emperor Valkorion. So, watch his story next.